that little idea, that little tiny engine that could, from a guy who was, in prison in 2012, in prison in, 6 months of 2013, that portfolio is over $10 million at this point. And that, for me, is just a testament to the little wins that you talked about earlier, stacking those wins.
Welcome back to the Rain Brings Growth podcast. I'm your host, Matt Sidwell. Today we're joined by Travis Richey. He's an entrepreneur, advisor, and a motivational speaker. He's been an investor in over 25 startup companies over the past decade. He's the founder of Accomplished Ventures, where they give second chances to incarcerated citizens and those that have also returned back to the streets. Can't wait for you guys to hear from him. How's it going, Travis?
Fantastic.
Cool, man. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. I love what you're doing.
Thank you. I've been following what you've been doing, all the different podcasts, and it's been really inspiring, so I can't wait to hear you.
Thank you. It means the world.
So let's just start with, what's a little bit of your backstory?
How far back you want to go?
Where are you from?
Was born and raised back east.
Okay.
So, yeah, back in Boston. So kind of grew up back there, East Coast. Typical, in my opinion, upbringing at the time. So what I mean by that is we walked to school. You grabbed icicles in the wintertime off of the neighbors' houses. Nobody had fences, so you kind of walked through everybody's backyard to get to school. Kind of a magical upbringing. And you don't know what you don't know. And so at the time, my mom, we grew up in a very religious household, very spiritual household from my mom's perspective. And my dad was a notorious criminal, notorious gang member.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the upbringing, in my opinion, you don't know what you don't know. You kind of look back at it now, and you're able to dissect certain parts of it and use some of it to your advantage or to your benefit for the rest of your life. And so that's really what we did. But growing up back east was a blast. I'm still loyal to anything that's related to Boston, including the food and the sports teams.
That's awesome. So were you, did you lean one way more than the other growing up? Were you more like your dad or more like your mom?
Such a good question. I can tell you to this day, my father's downfall was heroin. And he's the reason to this day why I haven't done drugs. And so I think oftentimes you're able to use some of those points in your life as a change in perspective to say, I'm going to use this not as a crutch, but to be able to impact myself in the world. And so because of that, I leaned towards my mom. I felt that a lot of her ideology, a lot of her religion, spirituality, good intentions, hard work was really where I wanted to land. And so it was difficult, like any household, regardless of whether your dad is or is not a criminal, trying to figure out mom and dad. They have two distinct roles, in my opinion. And so my parents did, now that I'm old, I'm able to say my parents did the best job at the time with the information that they had.
Were you the oldest child?
No, I have an older sister and two younger sisters.
I always feel bad for my oldest kid because she's got to learn just like I'm learning.
Yeah.
I'm parenting, I'm learning.
You've never had a fill in the blank 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's funny that you mentioned that because now I've been having this conversation this week with a family member who's in town. When you look back on your upbringing, it's much easier to look at it and say, my parents gave the best opportunity for us at the time. And sometimes your mom didn't have a role model or your dad didn't have a role model or maybe they did and they failed. And that's okay. There's a place for that, and it doesn't have any impact on you. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. It doesn't mean that your upbringing was a failure. So I think that's something that a lot of people, including myself, have to unpack as a child.
Yeah, trying to break that generational curse is huge. You can kind of see the patterns between your dad, your grandpa, and then you can just kind of see if you don't make a change, that's what your kids are going to look at too.
100%. And then you get to pour into them. That's some of the fun stuff. We have one boy, we have one son, and so it's fun for me to be able to go, okay, my dad spent time with me when we were young, but it was, collecting money or doing things that we shouldn't be doing as an 8-year-old. And so having the opportunity now to kind of reset and to be able to walk through life with Brock and say, here's some of the pillars of life. We listen to Hormozy on the way to school. We listen to Jordan Peterson on the way back from school, just to pour into him, even if it's a 10-minute conversation, even if it's a 4-minute snippet on a podcast while we're in the car. I think it's just good for these kids to pour into them. And that's something that our parents didn't have. They didn't have this like open opportunity. I mean, you can open up YouTube and learn anything. And so I don't think that they had that open opportunity. And so I'm using that to the best of my ability because I don't have that mentorship from a father from here's how you raise a 13-year-old.
Yeah, it's huge. I think, like you said, you are your environment, right? So whatever you grow up around is all you know. And I think as I've seen in the prison system too, is like I see families just like, oh, my dad's over here, my brother's over here, and that's all they've known. So I think just seeing that in my own household of like, if this is what I want my kids to be like older, I need to start changing myself right now.
It's true.
Because whatever I'm not willing to take on right now is just something that they're going to have to take on later, and that's not fair to them.
Going back to that, I know this is your show. I'd love your insight on it though. When you see family members incarcerated, generational.
Yeah.
Do you ever kind of like dissect that? Like, how did you get here? Did you want to follow your dad? Did you not know any better? Do you ever ask them any of that?
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity for the last few years. I've been on transport. So once you get them out away from everybody else, they just talk to you like you're normal people too.
Right.
So I've had a lot of great opportunities to talk to people. And yeah, a lot of it's just been, I never left my town that I grew up in. I seen my dad. I was coming to see him on weekends for visitation. And it's just all I understood. That was kind of like a family business. So it was just, that's all they knew. And if that's all they knew, then they can't make any other decisions other than that.
Right. It is. It's very interesting. Someone will have to fact check me, but it's like if your father's incarcerated, it's like a 70% chance, that the following generation, the following son will have some sort of incarceration in their life.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot over the last decade of just being there.
Really?
You see a bunch of even 3 generations, like child, son, dad, grandpa, they've all been in there.
Man.
So it's kind of sad, but then you see some people that they really do change. They take a couple years, maybe just have a rider or something, but they change their life and realize that this isn't what they want. Luckily, they didn't have to do a 10-year stretch or something. But
so true, man. And you can change your life from anywhere. I think that's what's kind of fun. Whether it's prison, you take a lot of people that are incarcerated. They have this mental roadblock because I'm on the inside. I can't progress. I can't get a job. I can't progress with my family. They start to have this woe is me syndrome. But it's funny when you pull that out to the streets, you kind of get a lot of those same woe is me out here. Oh, I can't lose the weight because I can't make the money because I can't. I tell people all the time, like, I know a few 100,000 guys that would give their left pinky to be able to be in your I can't shoes right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you, so when you got out of Boston area, what did you do then?
So from Boston, we went to Arizona. That's kind of really where my entire childhood fell apart. Mom and dad ended up divorcing, going their separate ways. And that was really where the rubber met the road for me to figure out what my purpose was in my family at that time. And at the time for me, it was to be a big brother and to be some sort of a provider. It was really what I got from my dad, was to be a provider. It was all I knew. It's all I still know to this day. And so the hustle mentality was what I was just born with. And it gave me the chance to step up. And so that's really what I did at the time. It was very difficult to get kind of into the nitty gritty, which I love to do with people. Mom and dad got divorced, very tumultuous, very ugly, very heated. And, the whole nine, the police and the restraining orders. There was a time where we lived in our van, very much rock bottom-esque. And so my mom took that opportunity. She went back to school, finished her degree, and she would deliver pizzas at nighttime and do school during the day. And so that work ethic is something that I got from both of my parents. One was done the right way, one was done the wrong way, I guess you could say. Easy to say now from these seats, right? And so that was really kind of the paramount years of my life. Growing up when you're young, You just know that your mom and dad are there. At the age of 6, you don't really understand any of the subtle nuances, to your dad's lifestyle. But at 16, when you can read the newspaper and when you can understand why people are at the house and your parents have 2 different houses, you're able to really see what's going on.
Yeah. How was your dad's dad? Did he grow up in a house of crime or?
Super good question. My dad's dad killed himself with a shotgun when my dad was in his early teenage years. So truly, to your point, 3 generations back is a mess. And so it was really my opportunity to say, this is where it ends for us, and we're not going to go down this path.
When you came to Arizona, were you living with your mom then?
Yeah, kind of went back and forth for a little while. Mom and dad, they lived about an hour away. Kind of went back and forth, that 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, during those times. Went back and forth. A lot of it, my dad wanted to lure me into that lifestyle. I think a lot of dads do. Even to this day, a lot of the people that I talk to inside in prisons, their dads still want them to be a member of the biker gang or a member of this club or that clique, or it's I think all that those guys know, and so they think if they can bring them close, then maybe they can have some sort of relationship with them, even though it's ugly. So he went back and forth with me, and I just knew it was just never in my heart, man. I just never really wanted to go down that path. It didn't bring a life of excitement or joy. It was really simple. So got through high school that way, went in and served a 2-year mission for my church, and really kind of found myself and my relationship with God at the time, and which is very much evolved since that time, as I think it should for everybody. From that time, after the mission, had the opportunity to be in the financial services world, and that's where I really thrived. It was the opportunity for me to take all of the skills that I learned from my dad at a young age, how to sell, how to really gain people's trust, how to create an impact. My dad was fantastic at that, like most, organized crime figures are. And so I took that from a positive side and moved it and morphed it into the financial services world, where I just thrive. I enjoy talking to people about how to save for retirement, how to budget, how to buy their first home, what a FICO score means. It was just so natural for me, and numbers came so easily. And I had the opportunity to manage, a small fund. It went very well for a very long period of time until it didn't. My dad got into some trouble, very public trouble, and at the time, the state of Arizona came after me as well. So in 2007, we had raised a few $1 million, and we failed to register with the state of Arizona. Simply put, for everybody who's listening to this and hasn't fallen asleep with the SEC talk, Securities and Exchange Commission is much similar today to like medical marijuana. You can purchase it in Oregon, you can't bring it to Idaho. You can purchase it in Colorado, you can't bring it to Utah. You still have statutory limitations, and you still have federal crimes. So in the SEC world of my crime, some 16, 17 years ago, whatever it is at this point, the state of Arizona did not recognize the feds to have superseding power and authority. So we still needed to pay the state of Arizona, register with the state of Arizona, and then pay our taxes and all the fines and everything with the state of Arizona, which we failed to do, to the tune of over $3 million.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, so a little bit of money. And and this is where the legality gets interesting. In Arizona at the time, and I say at the time because it no longer exists, because now you can raise money on Instagram. At the time, anything over a $99,000 threshold was a Class 4 felony, and I had 66 of them.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, and so it was really a dead to rights type of game. The money went from to and from my account, to and from another account. Those transactions took place in that state. It was really just a dead to rights. So I sat down with the entire organization. I sat down first with the FBI and then with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We met at Applebee's. They gave me a clean bill of health. And then after that clean bill of health, the state of Arizona came and indicted me for state crimes. And the actual crime that I went down for is called transactions of an unregistered securities dealer or salesman. So nothing nothing fancy or fun. I didn't knock over the MGM on fight night, and No bank fraud, wire fraud, none of the typically sexy stuff, no RICO charges, racketeering, the things that were really what my upbringing was all about. And I expected these to be very large. And so I fought that case. My ego fought that case. I'll be honest with you. I was very young, and this is a time when I had a little bit of money, and I took that as an opportunity to just buck the system. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm going to set this trend right, and I'll give you an example of that. This is how egotistical or ignorant I was at the time. So at the time when I received my indictment, it was quite literally just a knock at the door with two guys in suits, and then serving me the indictment. What a lot of people may or may not know about an indictment, there's a phrase out there on Google that says you can indict a ham sandwich, which basically means, is the sandwich bread? Does it have ham? Does it include cheese? Yes, yes, and yes. Ready, go. It's not an admission of guilt. So it's a very interesting gray area in the law. And so when you're served these papers, here's your indictment, I thought, man, this doesn't make any sense. This isn't even true. It's bizarre. If I told the federal government what I was doing and we registered and my attorneys registered, this doesn't make sense. So I actually drove downtown to the Attorney General's office, and knocked on the door, knocked on the glass window, and just said, hey, I'm looking for this guy, to the receptionist. And she, behind her bulletproof glass, under no certain circumstances said, not only are you not meeting him, but you should go get an attorney. And I thought, oh man, this is kind of real. So I remember driving back. I called a family member at the time who was a fairly prominent attorney on the East Coast, and I said, hey, this is what just happened. Your dad's an attorney, closer here. Who's the biggest criminal defense attorney in town? And he said, this is who I would go to. Called that person. Their receptionist said, not really taking new cases at the time. I gave him my case, gave him my story, dropped my uncle and my cousin's name, and a couple days later, if not the same day, received a phone call back by luck from that attorney and said, yeah, we'll sit down with you and see what's going on. So sat down, you're now talking 2007, 2008, and went through that case, went through that minutia, went through the mud, went through the muck, went through the public shame, the humiliation, the guilt, the Channel 3, the Channel 12, the Channel 10 news behind me. The only picture that they had of me was my driver's license photo. And at the time, I'm 16 years old. I'm yoked out because I think I'm cool in the gym. I have a black wife beater tank top on and a puka shell necklace. It couldn't be a worse narrative for here's the clown that took millions of dollars. I look like the clown that took millions of dollars. It's all bad.
Right.
Literally just gym tan laundry, this guy, right? It didn't look good. So that was the narrative that they put up on the TV. And I lived through that for years. My wife and I lived through that for years. And I fought that case. I went back and forth, and I did some very deep soul searching. What does this mean? I drove around the state at the time, just literally crying. What in the world? Here you are. I look back at all of the things of the past. I didn't take this left-hand turn with my dad. I didn't go down this path of crime. I didn't steal from anybody. I didn't hurt anybody. You do these things whether you're supposed to or not to. You do these things in your head mentally, I'm doing what's quote unquote right. I'm helping others. I'm giving charitable donations. I'm taking care of my family. I'm helping my mom and my sisters, right? You fill in all these blanks, why me? Very interesting. And so I relate to a lot of people who are going through the why me's, people who are listening to this, why me? And sometimes it's not even a why me. Sometimes it's a situation where you're taking a left turn because you chose to do so. Maybe you're leaving a career. Maybe you're leaving a relationship. And there's a lot of this chasm of uncertainty. And so it's easy for you to look out there and say, I was going to start this new career. I was going to start this new business. I was going to try to ask this girl or guy out, and none of it went my way. And so then you can start to add up all the reasons that you suck.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I did it for years. 2011, fourth quarter, November, December-ish, I don't recall. I went in court. I went before the judge. Now keep in mind for the listeners, up until this point, I've never been taken into custody, never been handcuffed. Most people would fall over dead believing that were the case. You have a state case against you. They've agreed that you've done this. They've let you quite literally run the streets for years. They've never put handcuffs on you, never arrested you, never taken you downtown, never read you your Miranda rights. But sure as shit, you're under investigation, and every 30, 60, 90 days, you're back in the courtroom.
Yeah.
So I'm running a business, I'm taking care of my family, and every single month, bi-monthly, quarterly, I'm back in the courtroom. And it quite literally goes like this. The judge says, do we have an agreement? The attorney general goes, yeah, like 66 years. My attorney's like, probation, first time, non-violent, non-dangerous, non-repetitive. This is a nothing burger. We'll pay the fine. We'll pay the $3 million back. Let's move on. And that's how it went. Fourth quarter of 2011, I just told my attorney, I'm like, I'm exhausted. I'm done. Mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, I'm spending $30,000 a month. Draining me. And my wife and I were eating Lucky Charms on our floor one night, and I said, whatever comes next can't be this bad. At this point, we've lost tons of money, tons of friends, tons of family members, you name it. I've been through it all. Nothing on the other side of this can be that bad. So 2011, I tell my attorney, like, come what may. So she, in her infinite wisdom, she said, I agree with you, but you want to do this in January because you want to get through the holidays. I said, well played. January 20th, 2012, I walked in, put my 75 cents in the meter with my wife, walked in the courtroom, and stood before the judge. My mom was there. My wife was there, a whole bunch of friends and family. And the judge said, I'm going to make an example out of you. The exact words. And used my entire pedigree against me. Because of your degree, you should have known. Because of your level of influence, you should have known. Because of your attorney, you should have known. Because. And remanded me immediately 2 years in the Arizona Department of Corrections. Boom. The silver bracelets go on in the courtroom, handcuffed immediately. Saw my wife from a distance, and that was that moment. I just said, we'll be all right. We'll be okay. That was my only concern, was how am I going to be able to see her? And as I was at the podium standing next to my attorney, I said, how am I going to be able to see her? And she said, you'll be able to see her as often as you want. That was the only conversation we had. They put the bracelets on me. The left one was too tight, cut my wrist. And I walked in, immediately remanded to custody, just like that. I walked in, I had my suit on. I thought that was going to make a difference for those people listening. It didn't. Didn't work to my benefit, didn't help at all. So you're going through this chain of custody, first time you come in, the processing, and, are you a gang member? Are you affiliated? What's your blood type and what's your crime? And, all this separation process. It's like rats in a maze. And I remember finally getting done with that. And at this point, I'm just fuzzy. It's the best term for it. I'm just fuzzy, numb. And I'm sitting, doors over here on the right-hand side, for those people who are listening, not watching. Doors over here to the right-hand side. I'm closest to the door. I'm on this concrete bench. Concrete bench is in a U shape. And guy walks in, and he looks like me. And what I say by that is, for prison politics, he's white, he's my age, and he has a suit on. So by default, he sits next to me. And it was the first moment of gratitude that I ever had during my time of incarceration. He got 7 years. I got 2. It was the first moment. It was palatable. It was palatable, bro. I could just literally taste the gratitude. And I thought, holy cow, 2 years versus 7. It's 3.5 times as long. This is easy. That was before I even knew that Arizona had good time. A lot of states have good time laws. Feds have good time laws. Each state has a different good time law. At the time, Arizona had an 85% good time law. And so that meant that of the 24 months, 85% of that, if I had good time, I would do 85% of the 2 years, 85% of the 24 months. And then I had an additional opportunity for 90 days of post-release probation or parole. So of the 24 months, I had the opportunity to do 15 months in its entirety, 17,520 hours for those math majors listening. And that was the beginning of my incarceration, life 2.0.
So was your 2 years a fixed sentence then?
Correct.
Fixed until you could get parole?
Correct.
What was your top out?
24 months.
Oh,
And
so
I ended up doing 15.
Okay.
Yep.
Dang. So
15
what was
months.
your thoughts going into court that day? What were you thinking you were going to get?
Nothing. I thought I was going to get off. I thought I was going to get probation.
Probation on the streets?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. That's what we really had set us up for. There was nobody. I had everybody there from a quote unquote victim perspective. People are like, there's nothing been done wrong here, right? People just want their money back. No problem. $3,059,000. Here's your check. Let's move on. It was just supposed to be that simple. I think for us, looking back now, I think we wasted a lot of time going back and forth and thinking that anybody who was in the Attorney General office didn't want this to be a political case. At the time, it was very big, what my dad was going through with his group and another state. So it was a back and forth type of thing. That didn't help me at all. And then I look back now, it didn't help me to drive up in a $100,000 vehicle. It didn't help me to show up in a suit. It didn't help me. Like all of these things, you don't look at it at the time. And I could tell you this, when one time prior to us even going to court, we sat down with one of the attorneys general and in their office, their attorney, our attorneys, and we sat down and we got into the elevator, literally got into the elevator. And I say that now because he was a kid. The kid that was there as the attorney, he said, "How long have you had that car?" Right when the elevator closed, I said, "What car?" He said, "Your car outside. How long have you had that car?" And I said, I don't know, a couple months. Oh. And I didn't even pick up on it. 3 hours later after the deposition, my attorney was like, that kid hates you. He hates you. Your car is like 3 years of his salary. He hates you. He's never going to forget these things. And so when I look back on it now, like showing up in a Ferragamo suit, that didn't help you.
Yeah.
Right? Like none of these things that I thought, like, hey, Judge, look at what I'm doing. It doesn't help you. The reality, and now I preach this to the guy sitting on the other side of the fence, is this is what I did. This is how I take full accountability. This is how I plan on making it right. I'd like to move on. It's just that simple. It's that simple. It can't go into the narrative, and I say this for people that are on this side of the streets as well. Whether you've lost a job, lost a spouse, lost a kid, lost a whatever, it can't go on the woe is me. It has to be like, this is what happened, and I need to reframe this. I need to take this perspective, and I need to use it as a message and not focus on my mess. And that, for me, is what I would have done in 2008 instead of taking this thing to 2012. But I don't know if I would have been here if I didn't ignorantly fight it till 2012.
Right. Yeah. Do you ever look back and think where you would have been if you would have not been caught?
Oh, man. Yeah, for sure.
Not like caught, like you didn't know.
No, you're totally
wrong,
right.
But,
No, you're absolutely right. So at the time, it was, when you go back for people in time, this was the time of, there was gentlemen out there named Alan Stanford. He was down in Texas. There was a gentleman named Bernie Madoff in New York. This was a time in 2007, 2008 where they called the Great Recession. This time of the world where people were losing their 401ks left and right. Banks were shutting down. Lehman Brothers, one of the largest banks in the country, oldest banks in the country, literally handcuffed, locked its doors. People were jumping out of windows on Wall Street to kill themselves. They were hedge fund managers, and they would lose millions and billions of dollars a day. That was the environment that we were in at the time. And so when I am, early 20s, walking in saying, it's only $3 million. I don't know what you guys are so focused on. This isn't a big deal. That didn't suit the narrative of the world at the time. And for me, that was my youth and my ignorance and my ego with the inability to read the room. So to answer your big question, where would I have been? It would have absolutely been $1 billion problem for me. There was no stopping me. I was a horse in a fire. I was young. I was educated. I had all the right things. I have a beautiful wife and a beautiful house and a beautiful office building and a great product and the ability to do finances. And so for me, had I not been caught at several millions of dollars, it would have been several billions of dollars. And it would have just been a bigger problem for me. In my heart, I truly believe that would have been the trajectory.
Yeah, I think just changing that framework, because like I said, I worked in transport. So I picked up a lot of guys that I've seen before, and I pick them up from counties, and I'm like, they're like, man, the system's against me and everything.
Yep.
And I always think, like, especially the guys that come back on drugs, I'm like, what do you think would happen if you didn't get caught, dude? You'd probably be dead.
Hmm.
Because he was, telling me how he was overdosing and all these other things and living on the streets. And I'm
Yep.
like, you need to turn that mess into a message, right? And like make something of yourself. You're getting clean now. Like,
Yes, it's an opportunity.
it's an opportunity. Take ownership of your
Mm-hmm.
actions. And then, they don't like hearing that coming from counties, but like, yeah, I totally
They don't
get
like
that.
hearing it coming from anybody if they're not willing to take it.
Oh, that's another thing too. You have to want to change.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that goes for regardless of where you are. Now that I've been on this side, over a decade, so much of the similarities, whether I'm inside talking to inmates or whether I'm, consulting with CEOs, most of them are locked up inside. Most of them are not authentically themselves. And so most of them will tell you something. So I say this all the time, like the crime doesn't fit the character. You've probably seen this, like to your point about the guy with the drugs. Rarely does an individual get popped for like the reason they should get popped. Like rarely is it like the guy that was transporting a U-Haul of coke,
Right.
right? It's usually like way downstream in the peon and poor decisions and some domestic violence fight, or your dog was barking and the police showed. Like it's usually just unravels,
Yep.
right? And so a lot of times they'll go down. And I was with a guy, Ian, and he was there for 7 years on a triple DUI. They roped him, is what they called it in Arizona. And so he never hit anybody.
Repeat offender
Yeah,
program. Yeah.
yeah. And so he never hit anybody, never, recklessly ran into a building, none of this nonsense. And so he went in and all of his fines and his problems were like motor vehicle related. No driver's license and DMV fines and all this other stuff. I'm like, my man is a drug addict. Like he should quite literally be in here for like, just because he went to the bar and did put a needle in his arm, my dude's a drug addict. And so here he is sitting in prison for 7 years, having to worry about paying a motor vehicle fine. Like he's just going to jump on a bicycle or walk to the bar. He obviously needs it. Like he
Right.
needs air.
Yeah.
So I often find that like the crime didn't fit the character. And so you would go like, hey, this guy, he's in here for car theft. He's not a car enthusiast. He's not taking it to Barrett Jackson.
Yeah.
He stole it to get dope. That's my guy's a drug addict. So, and I say that on the outside, I find that whether you're a CEO, whether you're a mom, you have this idea of like, I'll take moms as social media to begin with. Social media told me I should look like this, sound like this, talk like this. My kitchen sink should look like this. And I'm not living like in my true authentic self. It doesn't fit my character. And so every day I wake up and my feet hit the floor as a mom and I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated for you name all these reasons because I think that it's supposed to look like this. And I'm not getting the help that I really deserve being authentic. It's the same way with my guys behind bars. If you really opened up to folks and said, the only reason that I existed on the streets was to get dope. The only reason I existed on the streets was to fill in the blank. Now I can start to help you. Now I can start to bring you to where you really need to be. And that to me is where you start to live in your authentic self. And that's what I learned in prison. I was fortunate, bro. My prison time, 15 months. So I'll walk people through it. So I go in, you get segregated, you go into a jail first, and the jail will then plus or minus 2 to 3 weeks, depending on transportation and how full the prisons are. And then they move you to a prison camp. And they don't tell you where you're going. It usually happens at 2 a.m. and no phone calls. The actual phone lines are cut from when you're headed out on transport, so you can't make phone calls and tell people where you're going. And so then you get to a prison yard. My first prison yard was like a 60-day stopover, if that. And it was like a medium custody yard, and it was almost just like a filter. We'll put them here until we have time elsewhere. From that yard, I went to one of the lowest yards in the state. Super lucky, super fortunate. The bummer was it was the furthest yard from my wife. It was quite literally in Mexico. We could, out of our walls, out of our windows, we could see the Mexican flag on the other side. Most of our COs would walk over from Mexico, and then they'd walk back. It was literally that close. And it had 5 prison yards there. And because it was such a minimum custody, and we had the opportunity to leave every day, we got to go out and work. And so some of the jobs that were there, you'd have like postal workers, and not like you'd drive the car, but you'd like sort the mail or bring in packages. At the mayor's office, you had the fire department, had the sheriff's department, you had schools, you had a community garden. And lucky for me, because of my background and my education, I ended up at a community college. And most people, when they go to prison, they tell a story. It's usually like a lie, so they want to see your paperwork. And so when I got there, they were like, "You really have a degree?" Yeah, I really have a degree. So this one cat, he actually ran the yard at the time. His last name was Wood, ironically, because he was white. And he said, "All right, Wall Street, like, you've got to teach us. You've got to tell us. You've got to get to the college." Okay, great, whatever that means. So Doc was on the yard, and Doc was kind of in charge of putting people where they needed to go, where the case managers. And so wasn't on the yard a week, maybe 2 weeks. And they said, "All right, like, Monday, you're out. Like, you get to go out, you get to go to the yard, you get to go to college." This little, and obviously I wasn't roaming the college with like 19-year-old girls, which would have been a way better experience. No, I'm kidding. And Melissa's rolling her eyes right now. No, but it was the opportunity through this thing called the Small Business Development Center, SBDC. And it was a nonprofit group. They ran it, and they would come in. And so I just kind of did what I do and took over. So I would sit on the desk, and here I had 200 guys Monday through Friday, 8 hours a day. And I was like, "All right, what do you want to learn?" I want to learn about cars. I'm like, "Well, I don't know anything about cars." They're like, "No, I want to learn how to buy it." What? For real? So I started writing it down. Okay, this, 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 this. And honestly, bro, it was so rudimentary. It was so simple for me that it became therapy while I was inside. These guys wanted to know what my credit score stood for and how do I get it. Man, what a blessing that was. I'm like, "Here's what we do. Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. We're going to have you or your family members write to freecreditreport.com. They're going to send it in to you. We're going to dissect it together." Bro, it became so much therapy for me. I can't even tell you. It was such a godsend. And so I would walk through all of these different things: credit score, credit report, how to obtain credit. What does it mean, debit versus credit? Like, very rudimentary stuff. What is my 401k? What's the difference in a Roth IRA? And it became therapy. And so my wife, Melissa, would come down every Saturday and every Sunday, all 8 hours, bless her. And she would visit me all day, every day, stay the night, come back the next day, every weekend. And I would just pen this for her. Like, I'm going to change this. I'm literally, if I can take this and I can bring some financial literacy to these folks, I can change some of their outcomes. Because then so-and-so doesn't have to steal the car. So-and-so doesn't have to steal the copper. So-and-so doesn't have to knock, like, I can now show them literacy. And it was a beautiful thing for me, bro. And that became the beginning of what we do now, what my passion is now. I should reframe that. And so that opportunity for me on the yard, which I didn't even know existed. And I think a lot of people would be appalled. I have to tell this story. When the college was closed, when the college campus was closed, they would move us to the elementary school. If you can even imagine this, I'm in orange shirt, long sleeve, orange pants, orange slippers. There's 8 of us. We're in the lunchroom for elementary kids. I'm opening chocolate milks. Like, I got the pizza slicer for the ugly rectangles that we all ate when we were little, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm serving the nasty pizza and the chocolate milk. And it literally dawned on me at that moment. I thought, man, this whole town couldn't exist without these inmates. We were at the school. We were at the sheriff's office. We were at Wildland Fire. We were at the fire department. Like, this town quite literally runs on inmate labor. This is wild. It's interesting. And then how conditioned you would have to be. You've got little ones. I've got little ones. Could you imagine rolling into their school and having like 8 inmates literally serving chocolate? You'd lose your mind. What are we doing, folks?
Right. Yeah.
Who greenlit this idea?
Yeah.
This is a horrible idea. I don't care how nice you tell me Travis is. This is a terrible idea.
Right.
And that became like, all right. And I was able to like digest it. I told my wife, like, this is Amazon. These guys are just moving packages. This is just a $1 billion industry. So like, take the emotion out of it. How do I then insert myself in a $1 billion industry and then impact it for the good? That's what I took out of prison. That's what I took out of my 15 months. And the stories and the opportunities and everything that God gave to us during those 15 months leads me to where we are today. It's a beautiful thing.
Were you ever a mentor before you had gone in?
I wouldn't say I was a mentor. I don't know that I had the mental acuity to be a mentor for people. I think a lot of people called me for financial advice, but I don't think that I was a mentor. I think that there's a big difference in that. I'm not a big fan of these online gurus and people who say nonsense on Instagram because it drives me nuts because I'm in the trenches and doing it. So you don't get abs in 7 minutes. You don't make $1 million before noon. You these things are like real difficult. And I think social media has romanticized the idea behind being difficult and being hard. And social media just thinks that it's supposed to be easy. You wake up, there's no dishes in your sink. It's a beautiful farmhouse sink. It's massive. Your children are all perfectly manicured, right? The lawn guy's been there. Like, it's all BS, man. It's not real. And I think we keep feeding these kids this false narrative, and that's what turns them out to kind of be wimps. You get these boys that are 13, 14, 15, 16 that have never been told no in their life. They've never learned how to have any sort of equitable skills from school. And now here they are in the real world, and we wonder why they're failing all of our daughters. What was their other opportunity? Who's their role model? Who's their mentor? Where are they getting their fuel from? You can't get a live tree if here I am with a dead branch. It doesn't work that way. And so you start to walk through those things. So for me, from a mentorship perspective, what I love now is, okay, when I get those phone calls, hey man, I want to learn about X. Well, tell me why. Like, I can teach you about it all day long, but like, if this doesn't, and I'll give you a real world example because I just hate when people talk in circles. Last night at our house, we had some friends there. And this guy says to me, he's got a great job, great W-2. And he says to me, like, what's stopping me from just taking my kids to Spain and showing them the life that I want them to live? It's powerful. I said, I don't know, you tell me. So then he's like, well, I visited this state and it's kind of a bigger market and it could have a bigger impact on my W-2. It could help me financially. And so I said to him, but Spain's always going to be just like right back here, bro. And if it's always going to be back there, it's going to drive you nuts. And so if you want me to teach you about financial freedom, you've got to tell me, man, I want to reverse engineer Spain. Because if we reverse engineer like you getting to LA and getting a bigger W-2 and then you hate your life in 3 years, I wasn't really your mentor. I just gave you some BS that you wanted to hear. That's, for me, like an actual blueprint. Tell me where you really want to end up. You still want to work. You still want to put in 28 hours because you don't want to rot. You still want to make sure that you're engaged in life. Maybe you want to work at Hobby Lobby. Maybe you want to be the Walmart gritty, right? But I want to know everything about you in order to be able to mentor you. I want to know where your wife is at with it. I want to know where your kids are at with it. I want to know all the time that you want to spend together. I want to know where you're supposed to be at 50, 55, 60, 65. For some reason, we have this idea that 65 or 67 and a half or 69 and a half or 71, then I can take my retirement dollars. Then I can live life. But for what? For why?
Right. Yeah, you can't do much then.
Can't do much. And there's really no opportunity. I shouldn't say that. I'll rephrase what I'm going to say. There's very few opportunities for people to actually reverse engineer the life they want. Most people are waking up every day saying, I have to go here because of these obligations. I have to go here because if I don't, I'll have this fear that something negative will happen. And you get to the point in your life, you're a fit guy, you love the gym. You see the old guys in the gym with their New Balances and their tube socks?
Yeah.
Comfortable.
Right.
Right? Like, why do we wait till 72 to wear what we want to the gym? Why do we have to get to 72 where we don't care? And I don't say don't care in a negative way. I don't want people to take it that way. But like, when you authentically live out your life, that moment, when you get taken out of the matrix, right, as they all love to say, those moments to me are just beautiful. So when I get the phone calls of like, hey, will you mentor me through this? Like, nothing brings me greater joy than to have you and your wife just like penciling and penning. Man, Trav, I didn't even know, but like in 2064, like we actually wanted to live in Barcelona. Man, that is the world right there. That's what that means for me. And ironically, I got so much of that from prison. You don't have anything else to do but talk, walk laps, do some push-ups and pull-ups. And I got to talk to these guys. Like, what do you really want? I want to get out of the hood. What does that even mean, bro? I don't know what it means. Like, where would you live? I'd probably live here. In a house? In a condo? What would you drive? What would you eat every day? So I came up with this adage. Everybody who calls me, I want your perfect day. everything out the window. I want your perfect day. I want to know when you wake up. I want to know what you eat. I want to know what you wear. I want to know where your wife is at. If you're married, I want to know how many times you're going to have sex. I want to know how much money's in your bank account. I want to know where your kids are. I want to know your perfect day. I'll tell you what, bro, it scares everybody to death. To death. Spooky. Now I got to stare at this page and tell you I've been living the last X amount of years the way I don't want to live. I'll just flip that. We'll just move on. I'll just go back on Monday. It's easier.
That red pill, blue pill.
Man, that's the truth.
Yeah.
So I love that stuff. I enjoy that. And I got that from prison because you'd sit down with these guys and I had nothing else to do but to talk to them. Where do you want to end up, man? Forget about all of this. So I started this idea. It was accomplished. I would tell these guys, like, look, felon is a noun. Like it's just a person, place, or a thing. It doesn't mean anything. And so if you put something in front of it, it gives it life. Black hair, brown hair, short hair, long hair, blonde hair, silver hair. Now, my hair is my noun. It doesn't mean anything until it's like blonde curly hair. My wife has long blonde hair. Now now I know it. I see it. That's what I need your life to be. So that's how I developed Accomplished when I was sitting inside. Told my wife I'm going to put the ED at the end of it to capitalize on education. And I wanted to bring education back into the prison system in the form of financial literacy. And I wanted to tell these guys, pour into them and say, look, you can still be accomplished. This is just a road bump on your world of success, man.
How big was visualization for these guys to start making changes that they need to?
Bro, it was so big I didn't even know that it was that big, because we're going back to being grown men in a college, incarcerated in Orange, all walks of life. And we had to go back to baby scissors and magazines to create our visions, our wall boards that we put up on the walls, put up on the cells. There was no internet. There was no Googling. There was no, you know what I mean? Like, our resources were so limited that it became like a hunt and seek for these guys. And so when I would come by, it's a true story. When I would come by and I had this guy and he had Jordans, and I was like, man, I'm going to roast this cat.
Yeah.
Like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever, in my head, is what I'm saying. So as I get into it, of course, I don't come out of the gate like that. You don't do that in prison. That's stupid. So I'm like, walk me through, educate me. So when we got there, he was like, no, man, like, I never, ever, ever had the opportunity to get new shoes. I want to make sure that all my kids have new shoes. And this was just a pair of shoes that was like a nice pair of shoes. I want to make sure they have shoes. Oof, my fault.
There was more opportunity behind that picture than just what it looked like to you.
Totally. And it came out with stories. That was a beautiful part. You start to cut out these magazines, you know, like, what do they call them? Vision boards now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I'm sure there's a whole
Yeah.
industry.
I just made my first one last year, and it's
Serious?
crazy. Yeah.
What was on it? Let's talk about it.
Running a half marathon.
Okay.
I checked that off.
Okay.
I went through the CERT Academy for the prison.
Okay.
But I'd never been able to do that before because I was like 50 pounds overweight. So I had lost a lot of weight last year to be able to get to that spot. I was able to check that off. I'd been able to buy my wife a new vehicle because we'd always just drove old vehicles, right? So what else was some of them? Getting below like a certain percentage of body fat. Just
Nice.
like these different things. But I think I kind of was doing it more as like a goal board rather than like a vision. I think I kind of did it wrong.
Maybe you got some good outcomes though.
Yeah. But I think now I'm going to start making one that seems like it's unachievable. Like your
Okay.
vision needs to be so big that it seems unachievable. Otherwise, you're not making big enough goals.
Scary.
Yeah.
Okay. I like it. What would you put on there? Give me one.
Be self-employed. That's the biggest scary one, right? Leaving a safe 9-to-5 job, pension, insurance, and just taking a risk on myself and gambling. That's going to be the biggest one.
Mm-hmm. When you started to do that, did you find other people out there who were thinking the same way you were thinking?
I had started telling my vision to other people, and I got shot down real quick from a lot of people. So I had to be careful of who I was telling my big visions to small-minded people.
There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a tricky one. Like, people that I thought would be in my corner, they're not comfortable with me going past what they want to go.
Correct. And sometimes those people are close to you.
Very close. Yeah. Yeah. I had some, yeah. My parents were one of them for sure.
Yep.
Like, because they it's not that they don't want the best for me, but they don't want me to put my family into a bad position. And that kind of hurts, right? Because you're thinking, do you not trust me, or
you're supposed to support me and love me through whatever I go through.
Exactly. So it's come around though. Like, I think obviously my dad he's making changes now, but there was definitely a long time where we had to go through these trials, and you know, to him, I got a good pension, I got all these other things, and to go to an online business or something that's totally rudimentary to him, like, doesn't. But now he's trying to come around to it.
Is he?
He's trying.
Yeah.
I could tell he's trying. I think he's still got some doubts, but I think that honestly, I thrive when people say you can't do it.
Okay.
Like, bet against me. Like, it turns on a switch somewhere. So
I enjoy that. I enjoy that a lot. Okay, I like it. So vision boards. I think that's big. I think for anybody who's listening to this, if we could give them a tip, is like, especially this episode being, you know, where it is in the year. I think for people who are looking to change 2025, I run through mental, physical, emotional, financial, spiritual, and sexual. Those are where I start, like the 6 pillars. Like, where does it want to be? And I get really, really finite with those goals with people. You know, I have a deep connection with my spouse, and so I want to know exactly what she needs in life. I want to know exactly how much time and attention and care that she needs on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And so we pencil that in. You know, and then financial, where do you want it to be? And it doesn't have to be the same every year. It doesn't even have to be massive every year. I could just say, I want to make sure I max out my, you know, 401k this year. But you run with those 6 pillars, and I think it really moves you to a situation. It's like when you buy a red truck or a white Yukon. You see it everywhere. Right? Or when you start to say, hey, I'm going to leave my job in June, you start to be around all of a sudden people who are like, man, I remember when I left. I remember when I left. I remember when I left. Or boy, I'm too scared. I'm in this. They just started out where you were 6 months ago mentally. And so it becomes this like ecosystem of positivity. It's like as soon as you put it out there into the world, you start to see it. And so that mental, emotional, physical, financial, spiritual, sexual, you run with those 6 goals for 2025, and you just start to check them off magically because your subconscious has moved towards getting things done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's huge. Just taking that and wanting to change, right? And not waiting till the end of the month or waiting till the end of the year, or like take that and just run with it now.
The perfect time.
Yeah, there is no perfect time, right?
No.
Yeah. No. And just looking for opportunities. Like you said, you see cars everywhere, but then once you're looking at a certain car, you see that one everywhere. But you could take the same thing if you want to make more money. Now you start looking at opportunities and you start just seeing anything pop up that you wouldn't have before, but you have to be looking for whatever you want.
Yes, you're right. And then there becomes this whole landscape of opportunities. I have a friend who was looking like, well, how do I work remotely, you know, with my current job? And, you know, they won't do this and they won't do that. And I said, why are you looking at your current job? Wherever you want to work remotely, find employers in that time zone. And then you don't have to worry about running this East Coast, West Coast, you know, North, South, Pacific, whatever. Like, go to the end result of where you want it to be and then reverse engineer it from there. I think oftentimes when we look at, like, you know, you mentioned your massive weight loss, which is incredible, by the way. I think most people go, oh man, I have to cut everything out and I have to run 74, like it becomes this daunting task. And I'm pretty sure it was Goggins, like years ago, 3 or 4. And he said, all these people who come to me because he lost so much weight, hundreds of pounds, right? And he said, the first thing I tell everybody, because I'm tired, nobody does anything I say and they don't want to listen. He says, well, my natural answer now is, until you walk 2 miles a day, every day, 365 days a year, and until you drink a gallon of water every day, 365 days a year, do those 2 things first, and then call me on day 366.
That's huge.
It's huge, right? And it's like so many people are worried, like, do I cut out honey mustard or ranch?
Yeah.
Like, man, you have missed the whole mark, my friend. You've missed it all. Mark Cuban tells a story. Mark Cuban tells a story with his Shark Tank stuff. And he says, he's being interviewed. You've been pitched so many ideas, so many businesses. How do you say yes? How do you say no? How do you vet them? And he says, I have this vetting process. It's just quite literally a PDF. And I send it to everybody. I tell everybody yes. If you want me to invest, I will. Here's everything I need you to do, need from you, want to see from you, time frames, who to send it, the whole nine, right? 1 out of a million do it. He says it like, I will do it, but you've got to do all this work. So it becomes that same thing. I think when we set these goals, it's like this massive checklist for us. And then because of that, it becomes daunting. Or because of that, we can't find any like emotional regulation around it. Like, I don't know, I just have 75 pounds to lose. You're like, not really. You have 10,000 steps to take today.
Yeah. The
Like,
power of stacking small wins.
man, that's a good one. We could go down that rabbit hole.
See, that was my problem. I think when I started out my weight loss thing was it wasn't that I ate too much or I was lazy. My real problem was I just didn't have discipline. So like I was trying to fix the wrong problem. So once my 2023 goal was just to get better discipline.
Okay.
It wasn't to lose weight. So that
Like
was
that.
like, I'm going to start waking up every morning at the same time regardless. And even if I don't go to the gym or at least I wake up and I put my shoes on and I just go walk around the neighborhood once and then come back, that's fine. But like, let's just start out just working on discipline.
Yeah.
And then, because that's a real problem is I just didn't have the discipline on to eat the right foods. I didn't have the discipline to go to the gym. I didn't have the discipline to do the gratitude things that I needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it all came back to discipline. It wasn't the weight loss.
I love that. I love that. It's kind of like the crime and the character.
Exactly. I was thinking that when you're saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And I love that when you start to stack those little tiny wins. I think there's so much power in that we don't give the universe credit for, like you said. It's I don't think that it has to be these massive tasks. I really don't. You know, you take, it was funny when I was incarcerated, I wrote this little tiny book is how it started. And it was don't buy a cheeseburger with a credit card. And the whole premise was just compound interest on a daily basis. That was it. And so I would give these guys, in my opinion, I thought, okay, if you give a guy who's a lifer, or give a guy that has a 30-year sentence or a decade-long sentence, imagine the power I could show him if he gave $1 a day to this retirement account. If every one of his little paychecks, even if it was whatever they paid us, 40 cents an hour at the time, if it all went here and then in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, what it became, what it could become, that for me was so fun. And at the same time, I gave him the inverse of that, of like, if you go and you spend $5, which shows you how long ago I was incarcerated, by the way, on a value meal, and you did that every day and you used a credit card and you didn't pay it off, like, imagine how big this bill becomes. And so you have the opportunity each day to take this $5 and imagine the difference of outcomes. And so I don't think it has to be these massive wins. I think social media, especially in the world of finance that I live in, people are so focused on how do I make my first million. It's like, I love it. Don't get me wrong. But how much money we actually earn rarely matters. How much money we actually keep always matters.
I think people worry about the wrong things. They worry about the things that they can't control right now, and they need to worry about the small steps that they can control every day. That'll make that compound effect in the end.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Like wake up at the right time, drink your water, go to the gym, eat your healthy meal. And before most people even wake up, you stacked 4 wins.
Mm-hmm.
You win enough days, you win the week, you win enough weeks, you win the month, you win enough months, you win the year. And you stack enough years, you won your lifetime. So it all starts with like just the little steps.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's good.
Well, when you got out of prison, what were some of the failures that you ran into with trying to start your own venture?
Failures were deep. They still are. So when I very first got out, my condition of probation was that I had to have a W-2 job, which was bizarre. And then my second condition was that I had to go to a drug rehab class, which is a funny story, which is why I'm laughing. So my first condition, W-2 job, I stacked bread trucks on the midnight shift because it fit my quote-unquote W-2 job while I was going back into, raising capital, building businesses, buying real estate, doing what we do during the day. And so I really reframed that from the get-go. I remember that literally the day that I got out of prison is still palatable in my mind. It was this little tiny cage. There was 9 of us in there, and there was one gentleman in there. He had his debit card. He'd been incarcerated for 42 years, and he said, "I don't know how to use a debit card. Can you show me?" Goodness gracious. And I knew just on the other side of that wall, as soon as that door got popped, that Melissa was there waiting for me. And so it was this just massive, buildup of excitement. And it was also a reminder at that very moment of like how much work I still had to do inside with the guys. So when I got out, my first job was literally those bread trucks. I told Melissa I'm going to just work my ass off during the day to go back and to build everything that we had. And then at nighttime, I'm going to stack these bread trucks and get my W-2. And it worked out. Lots of long hours, incredibly long hours. Tons of times where I just hated it, wanted to quit. But so many good opportunities come from that grit. And I would never change that. And I also would never change that because now when I'm talking to other guys that are getting out, I'm not the exception to the rule. I don't get to tell you that just because I came from Wall Street that I went back to it and made millions on day one. So when you have to stack the trucks and clean the trucks and wash the cars and scrub the toilets, like been there, done that. And so I'm not above it. So I actually revel in it. That grit just, man, drives me. So then I transitioned out of that for my probation period. I had my probation officer come and tell me that I couldn't establish a company as a felon. And so that was my first failure, if you will. But it wasn't a failure because I had the opportunity to show him that he was wrong. The Corporation Commission could care less whether you have a felony on your record or not. When you're filing LLC paperwork and obtaining an EIN number, they just want to know that you've done the documents correctly. They could care less whether you have a felony on your record. But he was my first hurdle. He said, you can't do that. You can't do that. I said, well, why not? He said, because they said so. Who's they? It was my first opportunity to walk through, like, this is how it's going to be. It's going to be difficult. And so the failures, they morph over the years. At the beginning, when I first got out, it was typically because I didn't have the resources to do what I wanted to do. So a lot of that failed. In the beginning, it was because people would hear the story or people would Google the story and they would develop an idea behind it. Travis went to prison. Travis is a felon, therefore he's a bad person, and I'm not going to give him an opportunity. That right there, I'll pause. And some of our curriculum that we now deliver inside is an employment course. And in the employment course, because I went through it, I developed this simple phrase. And it said, hey, Mike, for the last 2 years, I've been incarcerated. I was incarcerated for this reason. State your crime. And when I was incarcerated, I learned A, B, and C about myself. And I think because of that, I can bring things 1, 2, and 3 in value to your company. If you can't hire me based on where I've been the last 2 years, I don't want to waste your time any further. And you stop talking. None of this, the DA screwed me. None of this, the prosecutor hated me. None of this, I didn't have the dope on. Stop. Nonsense, boys. Nonsense. Accountability to the nth degree. This is who I am. This is where I've been. This is what I learned. Here's how I can bring value to your company. Most of those guys that sit on the other side of that table will ask you if you have 2 friends that are just like you who need a job. Most of the time. If you're talking to the right person and they have the right opportunity to hire you, if you can bring value and you can sell and you can increase revenue, most of those guys will give you an opportunity and ask for other guys to come with you. And if they can't, then you haven't wasted your time. It's even better. So I reversed engineered that idea for a lot of those people. And so the employment side of it was really operating under that narrative. Here's where I am. Here's where I've been. Let's move on. Once I had the opportunity to build the brand and to establish it, then the narrative switched. When I became loud enough and big enough and had done enough to where people respected the brand, it then turned a narrative on its side, which is where I've wanted it to be. Let's look at this from a different angle. Let's look at this from a different lens. If the recidivism rate in this country is 8 out of 10 guys go back to prison regardless, then you have a 20% chance of doing what I've done. That's the narrative to start to tell people. And that's where I really focused. And I've controlled that narrative. And that for me is where the failures have come from. So for example, you'll find people even to this very day who will still Google my story and will find the 10% negative about it and will just want nothing to do with me. All the time. And I have to be prepared for that because I can't not tell you that that's not going to happen. And I think what's interesting is that whether you've been incarcerated or whether you've left your job or whether you've been divorced or whether you've lost a child for some tragedy, you go through all these traumatic experiences and you start to build up this level of pain tolerance. And so now, on the other side of it, being removed a decade plus, I usually lead with it. When people come to our home, when we meet people at church, when you meet people out in a setting and people go, "What do you do?" It's usually my leading. I don't want to talk about my accolades and any of the fun stuff in business and finance. It's usually, well, we have a little nonprofit that delivers 42 pieces of educational content to over 500,000 inmates on a weekly basis. That usually brings a pause because it wasn't like, oh, I work at Deloitte, I work at Albertsons. It was like, what in the world? The natural next question is like, how'd you do that? I went to prison. I saw a need and I filled it. Real quick if that person's ever going to be in your house or not.
Right.
And I love that. It's leading from that front of authenticity. That's what I would push people towards.
That's so powerful too. It's like in the movie 8 Mile when Eminem just gives all of his stuff at the end of rap battle. He's like, this is my whole life. And he just puts that, and then they have nothing to say after that. You just like put it all on the table. Because you're proud of where you come from. And you wouldn't be the person you are without going through those things. So accept me for who I am or move on. But I don't want to waste your time, and I don't want you to waste my time. So
100%. And I think that's where the power comes from. I should remove think. I know that's where the power comes from. And so for all of the people who will listen to this, that's where I want them to start from. And so if you're a mom who's got 2 boys and you're trying to figure out how I want to start the social media thing because I want to do it a little bit differently and here's my unique niche. I think when you lead from the front with authenticity, you find your immediate tribe. And that's the biggest thing that I just want to force down people's throats is the social media monikers that everything is fine and fluffy and rosy and unicorn and glittery. I don't enjoy that. And when you really get into the data, even like with Netflix, so much of the things that are most watched are the real, raw, behind the scenes, and they're gritty. I don't think that people stand at the water coolers of America and talk about the people who are on the top of the mountain, but they talk about the comeback. They talk about the underdog that beat the guy who was on the top of the mountain, right? Corporate America on a Monday morning will say, I can't believe this team lost to that team. And they'll totally dissect it on every channel because it's an underdog story. You came from behind. You came from back. You weren't supposed to win. You weren't supposed to be here. That, to me, is where I would love people to start from initially, is when I put my story out there, when I'm authentic, I immediately separate the wheat and the tares from the people who belong and the people who just don't belong. And it becomes a very easy way for you to navigate through life. And I would even force that down to the kids. I think the world, the TikToks of the world, have really forced these kids to filter their entire existence. And from a filter perspective, it just really messes them up. They don't want to lead with the authenticity because they want to show you their makeup tutorial and their hair tutorial, and then they want to be perfect. Then they want to show you their abs in the gym, and they want to get in their BMW that's super clean. And it's all a facade. It's all a lie. It's all a balance. It doesn't exist because all the plates, they fall when you try to keep them spinning. And then when they fall, then these kids start to have buzzwords. I'm depressed, I'm suicidal, I'm alcoholic, I'm addicted. And the reality is you just never had the opportunity to fail at the beginning. That, for me, is like the killer to it. The opportunity to fail, in my opinion, is really where the rubber meets the road. You get little ones. We've had 4 little ones like you see them grow up. And when they're 8, 9, 10, 12 months old, they start to pull up on things. They start to walk. They start to move and crawl. And then they fall down. The first thing you do is you put it back up. You set them right next to the couch, like you got this. Or set them next to the little shopping cart or whatever can help them balance. And at some point in life, we stop doing that for others. We stop picking people up off the ground and saying, hey, let me dust you off. Let me put you back in this place where you can balance. Let me put you on something that you can hold on to, even if it's me. And let me put you on a path of success, because failure is just reframing the data that you were given. That's what it is. At the time I made this decision, I now have new data and new information. I'm going to make a different decision. Failure is not forever. That, for me, is what I would just love to get rid of from social media. Failure, the only place that you find it is in the dictionary. before success. And that's where I want to push people to. I only want to know that before I get to success, I have to fail. That's where I would push people to, instead of the social media thing where, oh no, everybody only succeeds, nobody ever experiences failure. I don't enjoy that. I think when you lead with authenticity, you find your tribe. And when you lead with failure, it really brings people in. And they go, man, I experienced that. I felt that. I saw you because of that. This really means the world to me that you spoke on that. And for me, that's been the incarceration portion of it. I don't have a gritty, ugly, nasty, gnarly story. You know, thank God, literally. You know, I know a lot of guys that do, and it's very difficult for them. My story is not gritty, and so I'm able to discuss it openly. Most people can't even figure out Securities and Exchange guidelines, let alone understand my story. So it's not like I killed anybody and it wasn't this, you know. So for me, I was given that opportunity from God, who said, hey, you're going to take this and you're going to run with it, and you're going to be this poster child, and we're then going to feed all of these individuals who need the information, and they're going to learn from your failure. And I say this all the time. I said this the other day. The first time that Yahoo Finance wanted to interview me was not when I had millions under management, was not when I was like this Wall Street wonder kid, was not when I was returning 22% a year to investors. It was when I was back home from prison. That to me is where the rubber meets the road with a lot of these people. You start from that like gritty perspective, even if you're jumping on social, even if you're starting a new business, you start at that grit and you reverse engineer to where you want to go. And then you ignore all the white noise in the middle, even if it's mom and dad.
And I think a lot of times the failure is what actually allows you to be able to help other people.
Yeah.
Like say, an alcoholic doesn't want to take advice from someone that's never drank before.
Yeah.
But if you try and give someone advice and not let them know that you are recovered yourself and you went through those failures,
Yeah.
the thing that you think disqualifies you is actually the only thing that actually qualifies you to help others.
Man, say it louder for the people in the back. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It is what qualifies you. I look at it from a biblical perspective, and I enjoy this story a lot. You look at Jesus, he's crucified, resurrected, comes back, and a lot of his followers say, I can't be the same guy because we just saw what took place. We saw what happened. There's no way he was dead. Or he was dead, so there's no way that he's here in front of us. And his response, in short, to them was, come and feel. Come and feel. Come and understand who I am. And so it's interesting, the guy that I believe I try to be like on a daily basis, and I try to teach my kids about on a daily basis, he showed his scars. He started with his scars. Why don't we start with our scars? Why don't we take the opportunity to begin with our failures? Come, see, touch, sit with me. Let me explain to you where I've been. Let me show you the scars on my back. Let me give you the real world scenarios that you're going to experience. That to me is true mentorship. And when a guy like him starts with the end, starts with the scars, starts with the ugly, he found his true tribe. He found the people that were actually looking for him. And that to me is just perfectly parallels with our time today. Don't hide what you've gone through. Don't hide the experiences that you've endured. Don't hide the pain. People will learn from it. People will grow from it. Most importantly, you. And then you're going to find this authentic tribe who runs with you. And then all of a sudden you have this magic down the way that you couldn't have even thought about.
How do you let someone know that might be wanting to get out of their scenario? They haven't gone exactly to prison yet, but they can see their life going down the wrong way. How do you get them to start going towards the right way?
You're talking to an individual who's on the wrong path?
Yeah, they could just see their life kind of slipping. They could see it going maybe towards what their family has done.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to go to the family business or.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, there's no self-worth in that individual. When I get to sit in front of a lot of them in prison, they don't have the identity of who I am as a human and who I deserve to be. I'll give you an example. I sat across a couple weeks ago from a gentleman who had numbers tattooed on his face. Those numbers represent a gang. And on the face, on the forehead, on the throat. So obviously he had been invested in this gang for quite a period of time and had done things in order to get those markings on his body. And he was having a conversation with his daughter on the phone. And for the last 18 years, he's only been out for 6 months. He's having a conversation with his daughter. he was with a girl, and those 6 months he was out and had this daughter. And he said, she says to him, they're on a FaceTime call from his prison cell, and he's getting his markings removed. And she's crying. Why are you doing that to your face, right? Scabs up, scars over, doesn't look pretty, right? The face that heals and does whatever it does. I don't know the technical term, sorry. Because it's all she knew. That was her dad. And he gave her the most beautiful analogy. He said, remember when you told me about this girl at school? And remember when you told me that you noticed that she was doing some things at school, and so you stopped hanging out with her because she was doing those things? He said, the people that put these markings on my face don't want me to come and hang out with you. They want me to do what they're doing. So I'm taking them off of my face and my body so that they know I'm not going to hang out with them anymore because I want to come home with you. Identity to a T, like my man nailed it, crushed it. It was a beautiful experience between he and I. I think that, to answer your question, when these people are going down this path and they see themselves going down this path, they haven't gotten to the point where they go, I'm bigger and I'm worth more and I deserve more. And so me getting off this path of recklessness or me getting off this path of destruction is not just for me. It's because of the next generation. It's because of the next year. It's because of whatever you have in front of you that makes it bigger than you. And when you have that identity inside of you, then you start to make choices in that direction. And it doesn't have to be because you're a drug addict. I'm sure in part of your story was wanting to be healthier for your kids. Even if that wasn't the number one thing, your top driver, I'm sure at some point in your why I want to go on this fitness journey, you said, I want to be an example for my little ones. I want to go to the water park and not be embarrassed. I want to be able to show them that I have discipline. Some portion of that was bigger than you.
Absolutely, yeah. That's what I always tell my clients when I want, them, they want to start losing weight. And then we always say, like, well, what's your reason you want to lose weight? I was like, I just want to lose 10 pounds. Like, well, why do you want to lose 10 pounds? Then you start peeling that onion all the way back, and they're like, well, I want to be more confident around my kids. Like, okay, well, there's your real reason. And I always tell my clients, your why cannot be you because you've already let yourself down multiple times. It's much harder for you to let your kids down or your spouse down or whoever else down than it is to let yourself down. There's like a study out there that says that if you have to give your dog a week's worth of medication, they're 90% more likely to complete it than if you have to do a week's worth, right? So you're more likely to going to take care of someone else than you are to take care of yourself. So
I can see that.
Your why needs to be someone else, and then you can't let them down.
Yeah, I can see that. That's a scary stat.
Yeah. So it's just crazy to think that, we don't care about ourselves as much as we maybe lead on. But then
I think you're onto something there as well, but I also think it's easy to pick ourselves apart. You look in the mirror every night and you find, and this is what typically happens when people make a leap to something new. You pick yourself apart, like I'm not good enough. Who's going to listen to me? You start to have this imposter syndrome creep in. I haven't done this long enough. I don't have any worldwide accolades. Fill in the blank. There you are just brushing your teeth at night, just tearing yourself apart. I think that's so simple and easy for us to do. And I think it's because there's the thief of comparison, right? Like comparing yourself to somebody else or somebody who's a few chapters ahead of you or across the street just takes all the joy out of the life, of the journey, really.
I totally agree with that. Layla Hormozy has a saying she's been talking about lately on
I like her.
Comparison is the thief of joy. She
Okay.
says that is correct, but it's also comparison can show you what's possible. So
I like that.
Depends on which way you want to look at it, but obviously it can go both ways.
Sure. No, I love that. I do love that. Her and Alex have some incredible stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's the great thing too, is that Alex had to show all of his failures that he had, growing up and everything. And that's what gives him a lot of his validity, not just
Totally. He just posted that the other day. I just sent this to this gal who sent me a text and said, hey, thanks for all your help, but I've just failed and miserable and I'm shutting it down, and gave me all of these, excuses. And literally that day, Hormozy posted, you guys just see my content from my plane. He's like, I had 7 failed partnerships, 9 failed businesses. Like, You guys are just seeing the stuff like the oak tree that's here. Like you guys don't know how many times this thing's been chopped down over and over and over. The brutality of what I've gone through. Like 7 failed partnerships, 7 people I trusted to get into business who absolutely took advantage of me in some capacity. It's pretty incredible because now we think he's like one of the premier, guys out there from a sales perspective. How if he was that smart now, how could he let that happen to him? I think that's so easy for us to get into, right? Like, I should have known better. Nobody was going to do this. I should have known better. That product wouldn't have worked. You start to develop all these things, the self-sabotage moments. I just wish people could calm that down, quiet that white noise, and then remember back to, like you said, it's bigger than you, and to like, where do I want to end up? What do I really want out of this lemon? I just want to squeeze this life. So good. What do I really want from it? And that to me is where you really get into the goodness of life.
So when you got out of prison, you did this whole thing of, getting to 500,000 inmates now.
700,000 now.
Oh, 700.
Yeah.
So when did you switch to going to investing in small businesses?
Yeah. As soon as I had money. 2013, 2014. Yeah. So the idea about small business I love is you take an idea. There's a great book out there called The E-Myth Entrepreneur. It's such a good book for everybody to read. And the premise of the book is basically this gal is a great pie baker, and she opens up a pie shop and then realizes she just like hates her life. And so when you're going through this entrepreneurial journey, you're either the person who runs the store or the person who bakes the pies or the person who sells the pies. And if you're all 3 of them, you typically just hate it all. And so when you start to build a business, I love to find out what is like which one of you is this supposed to be? Because I know you're wearing all the hats, so let me help you with some infrastructure. And so for us, oftentimes it just became sales and marketing, right? How do I then go out, create leads, nurture those leads, turn them into warm leads, turn them into conversations, turn them into sales? And so for me, that was a natural trajectory. My best friend, business partner, is an attorney and a corporate attorney, litigation attorney, business attorney. And so for him, it was an easy pivot for us to bring people in and help them through a lot of the backlog stuff. Where are we at on taxation? How are we dealing with bookkeeping? What's our payroll look like? And so he was able to handle a lot of this back end stuff, and I was able to be really good at this front end. Where are our sales lines? Where is our pipeline? Where's our conversion rates? And so between the 2 of us, it was a really easy thing for us to do, pool our capital together, and then go and find what we called solopreneurs. The solopreneur is just the guy or the gal who's doing it all. And so the real idea about the solopreneur for us at the time, starting out, was how do I find somebody who's done so good being themselves? I'll give you an example. You find a guy who's a good interior painter. I didn't realize this was such a skill until my wife wanted to start redoing the houses. And then you find guys who are just magicians at painting. Oftentimes that guy becomes so busy, and then he, in his wisdom, will probably try to bring somebody else in so he can take on more work, pay that person a nominal wage, and take the difference between the job and the wage. But that person that he hired rarely does the job the same way he did. And so oftentimes this person will fail. Sometimes this person will do just as good of a job, but he doesn't have the support system because the guy who hired him doesn't know how to actually be a leader, because this guy's so good that he says, I don't have to watch him, I don't have to monitor him. And now this guy's just going to flail and go, I'm just working for someone else. So you have some of these subtle nuances in the solopreneur world, and they're easy for me to talk through. They always have been. And I see it. I can whiteboard almost any business. I had this mentor back on Wall Street. He would always say, I'm industry agnostic. And that was such a funny term to me when I was younger. And now you get it. Here's your top line. Here's your bottom line. And the vast majority of it comes down to the same metrics, regardless of whether it's a widget or a puppy or a pool company. And so for me, it was just so simple for me to whiteboard. So small businesses was really like the lifeblood of America. It's what I love. And so you'd find these mom and pops who got to a certain point in revenue, and then they would say, man, for the last 2 years, I've netted the same dollar amount, but I've never been busier. It's that moment. Those are the people that we look for. Great, perfect. So between our systems on the back end, we can help you scale. And between our systems on the front end with sales and marketing, we can help you scale. We come in, we take an equity piece, we inject some capital, and then we help them kind of run the business and systematize it. And the goal is then to obviously either build it to sell off or build it to, to put under the legacy portfolio. That's the big perspective. Businesses were easy to come by, and they still really are if you're looking for the right ones. We always wanted to look for the blue collar stuff. Nothing sexy is what my partner and I always say. I want where can I go in middle of market America and find a great laundromat? Where can I go in middle market America and find a good pest control company? Where can I go in middle market America and find a good pool and landscaping company? Where can I go in middle market America and find a good trucking company? You start to fill in a lot of these blue collar type opportunities, plumbing, you and I talked about that before the show, welding, car anything now, car detailing is taken off. So these things that aren't going to be replaced with the AI and the robots and et cetera, somebody really still wants you to come out, do a good job on their yard, do a good job on their pool, and know that when their family gets in the pool that it's clean. That's a experience. That's a personal touch point. And if you're great at it, you're probably great at it. You're probably not good on the business. And so that for me is what we look for. We look for it on a daily basis. And when we actually moved up here to Idaho, my wife would just giggle. We'd come up here and check on the house while it was being built, and I would just start I would just literally hit Google while the kids were playing at the park, like businesses near me, and I would just cold call them. You looking for capital? You looking for an investor? You're looking to expand? And it was really just Wall Street, tiny, right? These Wall Street banks, these Wall Street investors are looking for mezzanine capital, which is bridge capital, bridge loans for, multi-million, billion-dollar projects. And that's what we did for years. And now you take it from a small business and go, okay, mom and dad have a bakery. They should expand. But logistically, they don't even know how to start to expand. So they don't have a back end. They don't have a website. Their payroll's a disaster. They can't tell you what their cost of goods are. This stuff is easy for us. I don't want to bake the bread. That's where you find like the really, really good operators. So we bet on the jockey. That's what we've been doing. And so that is a passion of ours that we'll continue to build, continue to look for companies. We've had a couple good exits this past year. We had a tech company exit. We had a ice cream company exit. And so then in 2025, we'll continue to look for more blue-collar opportunities. I think that's where the world's really going to go. I know a lot of people are excited about the new administration, myself included, but I don't think there's going to be like this wallop of opportunities like some people are thinking is going to happen. I think that the economy is going to kind of stabilize. I think prices are going to still kind of stay where they're at. And then I think people are going to hopefully take some of that disposable income and move it back into the world where it should be instead of sitting on the sidelines scared. So I think that if you have a good product at the moment, if you have a good small business at the moment and you're looking to scale, I think it's a great time. So that's 50% of what we do over there, outside of the prison content and the curriculum there, which is just a passion and a labor of love. And then the other piece of it is all real estate. The real estate, again, non-sexy. So I'm not into high rises. I'm not into Miami. I'm not into Santa Monica, California. Our real estate portfolio is 80% government contracts, HUD housing, Section 8 type stuff. The government pays you on a monthly basis. Government pays the tenant's rent through the voucher program. You find the home, you renovate it, remodel it, or purchase it with the tenant. You build it to the HUD specs, the current guidelines in that particular county or city or state, depending on where you're getting your voucher from. And then the government will tell you, here's the zip code, here's what we're going to pay for a 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom or 5-bedroom, et cetera. And then you just reverse engineer that financially. We have to buy at this price point in order to make this type of rent. And so here's our return, taxes, insurance, et cetera, taken out of it. And that has been the biggest portion of what we're doing. That little portfolio, and I say this to everybody out there, like that little idea, that little tiny engine that could, from a guy who was, in prison in 2012, in prison in, 6 months of 2013, that portfolio is over $10 million at this point. And that, for me, is just a testament to the little wins that you talked about earlier, stacking those wins. It's one house a year, it's one house a quarter, it's one house a month, and then all of a sudden it's one house a week. And you get to that point where that income becomes so large that instead of taking it, you start to pour it back into the assets and you purchase more to offset the income and to use it as a depreciation mechanism on taxes. Now you just develop massive wealth over time. and it's not sexy, and it's not instant, and it's rarely on Instagram unless some charlatan is trying to sell it to you with snake oil aside of it. But for us, it's the slow and the steady play. It's a guaranteed dollar. And so that's kind of what our portfolio consists of at this point. Some federal contracts, some state contracts, and some guaranteed dollars. From a guy who's been to prison with a partner who is an attorney by nature, you're kind of risk averse. And so you're looking to make some risks that are calculated in a place where you can be guaranteed that income to come back. So small businesses as well as the real estate is where we sit now.
On those small businesses, what's the average time that you start seeing growth happening and really turn around?
From when we acquire them, or
Yeah, from when you acquire them?
it's usually under 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, the typical life cycle of a solopreneur is year one is typically a decent year for them, because if they're a really good painter or they're a really good landscaper, they've left their company, and that year one is like, okay, Mike left his job and now we're going to hire him directly. And you have a lot of people that follow you. You see this in like the gym world. You get a good trainer at like a major big box gym, and then they move to be a personal trainer at a smaller gym or a PT studio. That first year they make a ton of money because their rates went up and they're not paying their corporate tax or whatever the case might be. So that first year is usually okay. That second year is a nightmare. Oftentimes, you going on the gym analogy, people will go, I was at $50 an hour to train. Now I'm full. Year two, I'm going to go to $75 an hour. And then they go, I'm still full. Oh, geez. And then year three, they're going to go, I'm going to go to $100 an hour. And they go, hey, I've doubled my prices, Travis, and I still have no life. I'm still netting the same dollar amount. And I literally had this conversation 48 hours ago with a gal. I said, if you lose 2/3 of your clientele, but you triple your price, you net the same.
Right. Yeah. That's the whole Alex Hormozy thing, is just you have to make your prices increase.
100%, to the point where it's really worth it, right? To really jump on a phone call with somebody, to really engage. So for us, it's 3 years and under from an acquisition perspective. They're usually going to have that trajectory, and then it's just going to crash. And then they usually burn, and they go, I don't know what to do. I'll just go back to whatever I was doing beforehand. The systems are the key. There's a company right now, car detail, that we're dealing with. He's great. He's fantastic. His content's off the charts. It's fire. He's in a great market, great demographic. He's good looking. He checks all the boxes, and his leads are coming in to him while he's filming content on the vehicle that he's detailing. That doesn't work. People want a response. People want a person. People want a touch, right? And so he can't continue to do what he's doing in order to scale. Obviously, it works, and he has more leads than he can actually accommodate. But the problem is that becomes a negative thing. A lot of people will say, this is something out there for the young guys that are just getting started. A lot of people say, oh, I have so many leads that I can't even handle it. That's only a good point until people recognize it. And then people will say, hey, man, I can never get a hold of you, so I'm not going to refer you. Then it's bad. Then it's like, no, don't go to that one because he never called me back. No, don't go to that. That becomes a bad idea for these solopreneurs out there. So if you have leads that are coming in and you can't service them, you need to turn them off. Period. End of story. And then you go back to your well and you say, all right, here's my nucleus of business. I need to increase my prices. When you increase your prices, some people are going to fall off. Then you turn the leads back on and you come back in with higher prices on the new leads. And that should be the solopreneur cycle. Every 6, 8, 12 months, increase the prices, change the expectations. The people that drop off, you have that attrition rate. You open the leads back up and you bring them in. And then you have the higher price point, and then you have some sort of quality of life.
With these solo entrepreneurs, what's a big bottleneck as far as like delegation? Do a lot of people just think that they can handle it all? Because I know for myself, like I'm getting to a point between trying to do the podcasting, doing the fitness stuff, like I've had to start looking into bringing other people on, but then I think they can't do it as good as I can. Or, but like Dan Martell says, like if someone could do it 80% good, then that's freaking awesome, right?
Correct. Yep. My partner talk about this all the time. If you can make 60% of what you should have made by never touching it, we move on. I think to answer your question specifically, I would give a couple resources. You have Fiverr.com with 2 R's, if anybody hasn't heard of that. Fiverr.com is like a worldwide platform of individuals who will freelance for you in any capacity. And so from a podcast, hey, I want a podcast, I want to do content, you can find people all over the world and pay them, pennies on the dollar to do the content. I think that's huge in order from an outsourcing perspective. I think using some of those resources, and I think you don't know what you don't know. We now have a guy, he's actually in the UK, Chris, shout out, he's going to see this. He's going to edit this as well. No. He actually is. But he like we got him through Brad Lee. And in my head, I'm like, well, if he's working for Brad, there's no way I can afford this guy. And now I refer everybody to Chris. Everybody. He does a phenomenal job. He's the cleanest ever. He's got all the technology, and he's affordable. And so for me, it's like those resources, whether they're the Fiverr.com or whether they're people like me who can say, hey, man, don't waste your time out there. I'll just introduce you to Chris on email. Trust me, you can afford him. Trust me, you're going to love it. That to me is where you use the network to really move yourself forward. That's the first part of it. The second part of it is, I think setting aside capital to bring people on is where a lot of people will fail. So if you really get to the point where you go, man, I need to bring people on to do A, B, or C, and you can see that trajectory 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 months from now, what would you pay that person? And if you could pay if you found that person today, you need to set that money aside in a separate account. It's just paramount. So if you bring that person on 8 months from now you have an 8-month runway with them that you've already built up financially. That to me is paramount, because I hear so many people go, oh man, I would bring so-and-so on in this capacity. Great, what would you pay them? X dollars, awesome. Where is it at? I don't have it. Well, then you couldn't bring that person on. So to me, if you can't bring that person on financially, then we need to figure out what's the bottleneck. Is it because you're not charging enough? It's because you don't have enough clients? Is it because you don't know how to work your calendar, schedule your time? You're not prioritized enough? We need to figure out that particular bottleneck, because if you can show me that you got 50 grand in the bank for this person's 12-month salary, well, then now we just need to go out and look for the right person.
And it's worth paying a higher premium for the right person.
100%.
When they have the experience to cut down the time.
100%. Because then in the real world, if they really want to be that number two, they're going to work harder than you. You're going to put more on them than you would ever put on yourself, because you're going to have that natural inclination, like with the podcast, where you would say, okay, I'm gonna chop it up and I'm gonna put it up on all these channels. But then in that back, you're probably like doing cardio like me, and you're like, man, I should have put that one, and I should have chopped. That would have been a good. Like that's where you're just firing off emails, man. Hey, take this and take that and take this and chop that and put this and move that and ready, go. And you know that they'll do it because they like it, enjoy it, and then they're getting paid for it, right? Whereas with you, it just becomes like a task. And now you're like, I'm not the task rabbit, bro. I'll get to that when I get to that. It might be when my family goes on vacation, spring break next year, and they leave, and I can stay up all night. Then I'll get it done. But if you really have the opportunity to bring somebody on and you have the financial capacity, all day long, and then I'll layer that as well with people. If you can bring them on and you have the financial means to do so, the third part is the expectations. I see a lot of solo entrepreneurs fail from an expectation perspective because they don't know their role written down. And so whether it's an ice cream shop that we have, whether it's a pest control company that we have, whether it's a trucking company that we have, you have to know exactly why you would bring this person on so that you can hold them accountable to your expectations. If there's no accountability, no expectations, then you're going to be upset with them. Hey, why didn't you do this? I would have done this. You never told me about this. You never trained me for this. So that third component of can I afford it? Can I locate somebody is what would I expect from them? That's what I would give out there to that solopreneur community.
You're so full of knowledge, man. I appreciate this all.
It's all good.
It's like,
I love it.
I always say I always want to be the dumbest person in the room.
Yes.
You know, because there's so much I don't know. It's like when Alex Hormozy says you're paying life. If you're making $50,000 a year, you're paying life $950,000 a year to not be a millionaire for what you don't know.
Correct.
So it's just always trying to learn. There's so
much. It's using your network. Yeah. That's what I think. It's raising your hand. And like, you know, the old adage, like when we would go on vacations, like my dad never wanted to ask for directions.
Yeah.
It's like our modern day is that same thing. Like I never wanted to ask for fill in the blank. Like I never wanted to ask for a web guy. I never wanted to ask for a podcast guy. I never wanted to ask for financial advice and look stupid. I don't know how to, you know, like those little things. I'll suffer so that I don't look stupid.
Yeah, I think that was something that when we were, I don't know how you were raised, but like you didn't want to ask questions.
Correct.
And the thing is that the smart people are the ones that are always asking questions.
All of them.
Yeah.
All of them. And usually open-ended. That's the other interesting thing is like, walk me through that. How'd you get there? Show me. You really start asking these people these questions, and the world is your oyster, man, from a knowledge perspective. They'll open it up for you.
Yeah, going from being the most fascinating person in the room to the most fascinated and asking the questions.
Yeah,
Right.
totally.
Which is a mindset that you have to shift,
Yeah.
because I always thought that, you wanted to stick out, and that was maybe my ego. I'm sure it was my ego, but and now I just want to like sit back and learn.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Totally. There's not a day that goes by, like from a radio perspective, even when I'm in the gym, it's most of the time it's learning. Whether it's financially related, whether it's real estate related, whether it's international tax related, like whether it's depreciation on that, like it's constant learning. And I think if people are looking at that, like if people are listening to this, when they're listening to this, take those moments in time when you think you have quiet noise. Anytime you put your headphones on, what are you putting into the tank? Is it like Nicki Minaj's latest garbage, or is it like How to Scale 10x? Those to me are where you start to look at, and then you start to go to with people like, how do I put myself in the room? But then how do I become educated in the room? And oh man, I just listened to this and he happens to be the expert on it. Now that I'm in the room, I'm going to ask this intelligent question so that I can just fast track the next 24 months.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was on the bus last year going from, Boise to Coeur d'Alene every week. That's like 10-hour ride.
Yeah.
So I'm just putting on audibles because there's only so much music you can listen to. Like I'm listening to all these books.
Yep.
And that's actually what got me started on my whole journey. I mean, I was listening to like Wes Watson all the time, right? This is funny because me being a prison guard, right, listening to him, and then I got on his program.
Yep.
And then it just like cascaded everything for me.
I love it.
But it's just always bringing in more information and learning what you don't know.
Yeah.
It's crazy, man. But I appreciate you coming on. This has been great.
Good. I hope it's been helpful.
Oh, amazing.
Okay.
So where's a good spot for everybody to follow you at?
Always on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. It's I am Travis Richey, Richey. And then our nonprofit is accomplishedventures.org.
That's awesome. Are you out here in Idaho then, in the prison system too?
Yeah.
So I'm sure all my friends will already know you then.
Oh, they will. Oh, they will. Yeah. It's fun. It's been a journey that I couldn't even anticipate. I had a conversation last week with a big group called God Behind Bars. And they have a whole nother app. And they go out to like 900,000 inmates. And so they want the content. And so we'll put the content over there. And it's just such an amazing nucleus. Like when you really just say, I'm in the people industry, and you just really sit down and see what people want and need. The idea of like, I can't find a job or I don't know what to do for a business, like that's just because you're not listening and looking. That's my opinion.
Looking for those opportunities.
Man, it's so simple. It's like Gary Vee. When he's like, you've got a computer in your hands, you've got a payment system in your hands, you've got advertising in your hands. Like it's literally all on your phone nowadays. It's never been easier for you to find opportunities that you're actually looking for. And that to me is just like the biggest message for everybody, whether you're watching this, because we'll take this and we'll put it on the inside for everybody, whether you're watching this incarcerated and you're never getting out or you're getting out tomorrow, the opportunities are quite literally between your two ears. And it goes the same for the people that are out here on the streets on this side of the fence. The people who say, I can't fill in the blank, I can't find this job, I can't lose this weight, I can't make this money, I can't save. They're looking for those opportunities to fail. They're looking for those opportunities to not make it happen. I think it's the other people that reverse engineer it and you put it down on the board to bring it back to our original conversation of whiteboarding, vision boarding, dialoguing it, looking at the pillars of mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, financial, sexual. How do I want to have 2025 look? And then taking all of your efforts to those particular goals, and the rest just seems to fall into place like magic.
That's awesome. Man, I really appreciate you coming on. And
likewise, brother.
Hopefully we'll be able to do this again.
We will.
I look forward to seeing the networking too on like the first Fridays of the month.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Yeah. I'm excited to do that.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Thanks.